Okay, well, I think my clock says it's just a minute past noon here, so I guess we'll go ahead and get started. You guys might hear a few more people chime in as we start, and we do ask that if you can, please go ahead and mute your phone on your end so we can minimize the background noise. Welcome to Grow Nebraska's September 3rd Thursday training. I'm Katie Obradovich with Grow Nebraska, and part of my job is to facilitate training opportunities like these. So for those of you who don't know, Grow Nebraska is a nonprofit focused on helping make a sustainable living anywhere in Nebraska. We do this through promotion, market access, and educational opportunities like this. If you have any questions about membership, I'll be sending you my contact information after the call. Third Thursday trainings wouldn't be possible without the help from our wonderful sponsors, and this month's training is sponsored in part by Grow Nebraska and the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, and funds provided by the Local Food Promotion Program of the Agricultural Marketing Service, U.S. Department of Agriculture. We want to say thank you to all of our wonderful sponsors. And now the reason we're all here, Ben Kuspa from the Department of Economic Development is here today, and he would like to share some highlights of grant and investment programs to talk about the recent and upcoming changes in the Innovation Fund program. So we're excited to have him here with us today. So Ben, I guess we'll let you take it away.
Thank you. So my name is Ben Kuspa. I've been with DED since about 2012, and today I'd like to just go over the Business Innovation Act, kind of the background and why it was started, a quick summary of all the programs that we do, and since I'm the program administrator for the prototype grant and the academic R&D grant, I'll probably go into depth with the prototype grant and provide some details on what we're looking for and then how you can either help other people apply or yourself apply, what some pitfalls are and some do's and don'ts. So like I said, I've been with DED since 2012. I've been in this role since early 2014. Prior to that, I worked on a couple of other grant programs, including Intern Nebraska and Customized Job Training, and I also worked at research at DED. Before I was with DED, I worked at the Department of Labor, and I did labor market information there. So I'm kind of a data nerd in that sense, and I like to work with numbers. But rounding out the team for the Business Innovation Act, or the innovation team, is Nisha Avey. She handles, we'll go into the programs, but she handles SBIR, STTR grants and entrepreneurship efforts. And then Joe Fox is the manager of the innovation team, and he handles the commercialization investment program. The background, this kind of started in 2010. DED and Department of Labor, they commissioned a report from the Patel Technology Partnership Practice, which is a national research firm, and they looked into the state of Nebraska's business ecosystem. They ended up drafting a 200-page report. The primary focus of that was to identify Nebraska's industry clusters, and then there's three groups, which are the current strengths, then they have emerging strengths and retention opportunities, and they broke down essentially what we're really good at. And not surprisingly, agriculture came out of that. Other things include precision metal manufacturing, healthcare, things like that. Emerging strengths include a lot of bioscience and information technology. So those were kind of shaping the way that economic development and labor could assist with the future of Nebraska's businesses and employment. They also delved a lot into talent, anticipated needs for talent and current needs for talent. A lot of that came through, and that started the very popular Intern Nebraska program, which is a grant program and assistance program in helping businesses hire students. Either at the time it was only college students, now it's opened up to high school students, but provide opportunities for them to get exposure to the workforce in Nebraska and hopefully retain them in the future instead of losing them to other states. So what they also found is there was a clear shortfall in entrepreneurial activity and access to capital for early stage businesses, especially those that are conducting research and development that lead to high growth potential companies. And that's why LB 387, or the Business Innovation Act, was passed in 2011. Directly from the Act is the phrase, the purpose of the Business Innovation Act is to encourage and to support the transfer of Nebraska-based technology and innovation in rural and urban areas of Nebraska in order to create high-growth, high-technology companies, small businesses, and micro-enterprises and to enhance the creation of wealth and quality jobs, which is a lot of things to say that we're trying to help small businesses. And mostly small businesses, but also people that are looking into developing technology. So the BIA created or modified a suite of programs, and the core programs that came out of that are the Microenterprise Technical Assistance and Small Business Lending Program, the SBIR/STTR, that's Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Matching Grants, the Prototype Matching Grant, which is the one I administer, the Academic R&D Matching Grant, and the Commercialization Investment Program. So it was meant to encompass the business financing continuum, and in most PowerPoints and things that we present, there's a nice little graph, if you can imagine it, with what they call the valley of death, which is when a small business is starting up, especially ones that need significant amount of capital, where they're developing a new, novel, and innovative product that hasn't been brought to market before. You go through a phase of discovery, proof of concept, and product design where there's some significant capital needs. People are lacking the funds to finance that early stage R&D. And then it goes into product development and mass manufacturing, which is kind of the growth or seed stage. We call it pre-seed and seed stage. The intention of the prototype grant, the SBIR, STTR grants, most of the grant programs are to kind of help with that pre-seed development when those companies are in the valley of death, when it might be abandoned, a good idea might be abandoned because of lack of financing, and hopefully can get them over that and into the profitable stage. It also created there's a value-added agriculture program that existed. It predated this, but what they did is they absorbed it into BIA, and anything that's any projects that are associated with value-added agriculture, that might be new food product development, agricultural machinery, doing research on new crops and things like that. That has a lower matching requirement for any of our matching grant programs, where we can fund 80% of the development work on those projects. So that is just anything that qualifies for value-added agriculture also has to qualify for one of the other grant programs, and it just has a lower matching requirement. There's also an angel investment tax credit program that was instituted at that time. That is something that small businesses take advantage of to kind of loosen the purse strings of investors, where there's a refundable tax credit of up to 40% of an investment. That's been overutilized in the last 3 years, and they've had to prorate as of day one. And if anybody's interested in that, I can definitely provide more information on the angel investment tax credit at the end of this. So since late 2011, when this went into effect, there have been, just to give you some numbers, we have a budget of about $7 million that encompasses the entire suite of programs that we can disseminate each year. We've done 120 prototype awards, totaling $5.5 million. We've done 30 academic R&D projects for $3.3 million. We've done 65 SBIR or STTR projects, totaling $2.5 million. 47 value-added agriculture projects, totaling $4.4 million, and 22 investments for a total of $6.75 million. So a lot of funding has been shared with businesses. A lot of that has been matched. All of it's been matched in some capacity, with the exception of SBIR Phase 0. And we had an economic analysis done by a UNL economics professor back in 2014. What they found is that about companies raised about $5.12 for every $1 in state money put in, for a total economic impact of $53 million, with the money that was or the funding that was provided at that time. And that's very early stage, given that it is only effectively 2 years into the program, and we hope to see further returns down the road. So, delving into I'll provide a quick summary of the different programs that we have, and then go into prototype last. The innovation programs are either matching grants. They're focused on that pre-seed stage, or there's the investment program, which is commercialization for seed stage companies. And with the exception of the angel investment tax credit program, all of these programs are competitive and need to be approved by a review committee inside DED. Typically, there's more demand than there is available funds, so there is some contention for those funds there. The funds are drawn down on a reimbursement basis for all the grant programs, and the businesses submit a proof of expense and payments, and DED reimburses a share of the cost, which is how we ensure that that it is a matching grant and that there is a share paid for by the business. Commercialization is the only exception to that program. So SBIR, STTR, for those who aren't familiar, we have $1 million in matching funds for that program each year, and we start on the calendar year for all of our programs, so that's January 1st. The Small Business Innovation Research and the Small Business Technology Transfer programs are federal grant programs. They have, I think there's 11 different agencies that participate, but they're federal agencies that they either encourage research and development in a needed topic, or they actually commission a small business to create something that they would like to purchase. So on this spectrum of permissive to or open topics, which under SBIR, where they're asking a small business to say, I have an idea and I would like to create this technology and do some research in this area. I would say that USDA, the National Science Foundation, NASA are more accepting towards the idea of any open solicitations in that sense. And the Department of Defense agencies are the ones who are really looking for specific applied things that they can purchase down the road. In order to qualify for that, you must be a for-profit small business with a principal place of business in Nebraska, and at least 51% of the project has to take place in Nebraska. This gets kind of confusing, but we have 3 phases in this, and it's a multi-phase system under SBIR. But Nebraska came in and they said, what we are really lacking is not enough people are applying for SBIR grants from the federal government. Nebraska is an underserved state. We don't get enough applications and awards per capita. So the legislature said, why don't we do a Phase 0 grant, which is a planning grant, and that will provide, DD can provide up to $5,000 with no match required for a business to either hire a grant writer or a grant reviewer or pay for a principal investigator within the company to complete the application in order to hopefully gain a Phase 1 SBIR. The catch there is that you have to, as a business, you have to identify relevant solicitations from the federal agencies and submit an application, which is a short Phase 0 application to DED within at least 30 days prior to the solicitation close date. Those solicitations for topics are usually announced about every quarter. It's all on SBIR.gov, and each agency does about 2 cycles a year, so it's really a very programmatic and a closed cycle program where they're looking at that. But we can provide some funding. We've done a significant amount of Phase 0 applications this year, and those are coming to fruition. We're seeing a lot more companies receive Phase 1s and Phase 2s, which is great to see, and more of those matching funds are going out as a result of that. Whereas in past years, we haven't utilized the full $1 million that we have. If you do land a Phase 1 SBI or STTR, typically the federal government approaches this from they grant a phase 1 grant to multiple companies, and then they'll advance a couple of those companies, or maybe one or two, to a phase 2. And a phase 1 is typically in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $225,000. It varies by the agency and what the topic is, but that's for a feasibility study. And depending on how successful a business is in advancing this technology or the research, then they may qualify for a phase 2, and those can be multiple millions of dollars, anywhere from a few $100,000 to multiple millions of dollars to further research that and develop a commercially viable product. The key thing with DED is that we can match 65% of the federal award up to $100,000 so that the business can increase their competitiveness in the phase 1 and expand the scope of research that they're doing. The catch there is that you have to apply for the match within 45 days of the notification from the federal agency. So the SBIR program is great, especially for those people who are in the industries that the kind of open solicitation groups are looking for. Some examples of companies that have utilized in the past, we just had a company out of Lincoln that does cricket protein powder, and they make foods based on cricket protein called Bug Eater Labs. They received they applied, received a phase 0 planning grant, and they just got a notification from, I believe, the USDA that they received $100,000 from the USDA to do some research into making cricket protein products. So that's one of the open ones. In the past, we've had a company out of Roca who does, they are working with the DOD, and they are a manufacturer, and the DOD wanted to, I believe they created two things. One was a anti-torpedo detection and intervention system, and one was a shower for naval ships. And both of those, they were able to land those, and those resulted in contracts, I believe, so with the federal agencies, so that they were a supplier for that. So those are some quick examples of people who have successfully gone through that system. It's a long wait to apply and hear back from them, because it usually takes 6 months to review. It is programmatic, but Niche has done a great job being involved with trying to get more of these agencies to come through. And as this last June, I believe, they had a road show where a lot of the agencies came through and talked to individual businesses, and I believe that will continue in the next year or two. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in any SBI or STTR activities.
Now, Ben, when you say a long time, how long would you say it typically takes?
To hear back from the agency, it takes about 6 months, which is what we've experienced sometimes is that companies have a gap in between either the phase 0 application and the phase 1, and or when they have a phase 1 and a phase 2, and then they've successfully designed a technology, done the feasibility study. There's a lot of promise that they'll go to phase 2, but they have to wait and hear back, and it puts things on hold. We actually had a company that was based out of based on some professors in Lincoln. They provided a system that would work in a meat packing plant, and they had successfully done a phase 1. They wanted to continue research, but they weren't waiting to hear back for phase 2. DED assisted them and provided some academic R&D money so that they could continue that research while waiting to hear about the phase 2. So there's other options out there. We move a lot faster than the federal government in that sense. But we require a match, and the federal government does not. So that's the trade-off there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Moving on, one, academic R&D is a program. We have $850,000 per year for that. Again, it's a multi-phase program. It's for businesses of any size, for-profit businesses of any size that have physical locations in Nebraska, and they're working with, or they're doing applied research and development that's either conducted by or in conjunction with the Nebraska College or University, or as a result of technology licensed from a Nebraska College or University. So there's some leeway there, but there does need to be that university connection. I will say the lion's share of that goes to UNL as a R1 university. That's kind of where it's at. We'd love to see some involvement from community colleges. We've gotten a lot more traction with UNL and UNMC in the past year or two, but we'd love to see some state colleges, some smaller colleges participate in that program as well. In order to apply for that, you have to submit an application with the budget, milestones, a summary of the company, and a draft of an agreement with the university so we understand the relationship with the university, whether that be a contract, what they call a sponsored research agreement, or a licensing agreement from the university that shows that you're licensing technology from them. That phase one grant is up to $100,000. It's kind of designed for doing proof of concept, but a lot of the people are going directly into development at that time. And it needs to be matched at a one-to-one basis from a non-state funding source. So that's the match on that is 50%. DD can provide 50%. Phase two matching grants are an extension of phase one that can go up to $400,000, and again, it's a one-to-one match. But like I said before, value-added agriculture grants are typically are matched at a 4-to-1 rate, which is an 80% reimbursement rate, and those have that's resulted in a lot of companies that are utilizing academic R&D under the value-added agriculture umbrella. Examples of successful academic R&D projects are we had one of my favorite is Midwest Hops. They're doing some research in hop development and hop growing. They also did they're creating some machinery for hops drying and harvesting, and then they're also doing a study on ginger production, baby ginger production. And they were in the news recently. I believe they had a profile in the Lincoln Journal-Star or on one of the local news channels, and it's great to see them utilizing those connections with the university, and especially in trying to bring something new to the state that doesn't currently exist, because most hops production is done in the Pacific Northwest. So that was one example. We've had a lot of people do things in the agriculture realm with food production, including dairies, including meat processing. But I don't want to limit your scope of imagination, because academic R&D, there's a lot of resources at the university that you can leverage, including manufacturing. There's a nanomaterials research center there. It's kind of amazing what they can do. So, but that one goes through me as well. And if you have any questions on that, let me know. Quickly delving into commercialization, that is our investment program, and that's there's a minimum of $2 million that goes to that from our fund every year. It's for Nebraska-based businesses with 500 employees or fewer in non-retail primary industries. It's an equity investment program. They can also structure things. If you're familiar with venture capital, they can structure the terms as a follow-on investor, as a lead investor. They can do convertible notes. You know, it is kind of up to our contractor who actually facilitates this program, and that's Invest Nebraska. It does require a one-to-one match, and you can use the funding for that for working capital, lease improvements, equipment, job creation, job training. It's a transfer of money, with the return being that there's they get an equity stake in the company. So Invest Nebraska is a 501c3 VC firm. They're a nonprofit. The goal of what they're doing is if they They make the investments on behalf of the state, so the state doesn't hold the equity. And if they receive any return on these investments, which hopefully they will, when these programs sunset and go away, they will have a pool of funds that they can turn into an evergreen fund and invest in Nebraska companies in perpetuity. So that's the goal with that. They have a double bottom line of economic development and economic return. So most VC firms, if you're familiar with VC firms, want to see an exit in 5 to 6 years and a return on their investment, a 20x return on their investment. But Invest Nebraska is more patient, and they're more looking at spreading that funding around and hopefully helping people that really need it and that are going to be long-term tenants in the state of Nebraska and good businesses to keep around. Any questions on any of those programs? All right. Delving into Prototype. So Prototype is our most popular program by far, and we get the most demand on that program because it's the one with the fewest strings probably. Any Nebraska-based, we have $1 million that we typically have allocated to that every year. It's any Nebraska-based business with 500 employees or fewer in a non-retail primary industry is eligible to apply for that. As of last year, DED can award up to $150,000 in grant funds with a minimum match of 50% of the grant award. So the 2-to-1 match, we reimburse at a rate of 66%. We can go up to 150. We don't have the funds to fund most projects at 150. So our median award is still around $50,000, and that's our target. Our cap used to be $50,000. We've done a few projects above that, but it's kind of rare. The matching funds must come from a non-state source, so either a bank loan, investor letter, or a loan document, and we ask for some proof of match at the time of application. The use of funds is for product development. This is where people kind of get hung up, is that we really want to see this based on the application should be focused on the project and the product you're trying to bring to market. A product can be it's kind of nebulous in some cases. So we have a lot of software companies that apply for this, and software as a service is considered a product. And so what isn't considered a product is things that are internal process improvements, and we've had some confusion on that. So we've had a couple of denials during my tenure where people have tried to use funding to improve their own process internally. If you're not going to sell it and make a profit off of it, it's probably not a product. So the use of funds, you can use that, and with software, it's typically we would pay for things like engineering time, consultation costs, limited project-related fees, things like Amazon Web Services if you need to host certain things like that. For hardware, we provide some funding for materials and supplies, limited specialized tooling as long as it's pre-approved, labor, and consulting costs again. So ineligible use of funds, a lot of people ask for things like paying for overhead, marketing, legal work, accounting. Those are specifically excluded from our program. So it needs to be on that product development side of things. In most cases, and pretty much all cases, the project must take place in Nebraska using Nebraska employees or Nebraska-based contractors. The only exceptions to that is if it's a really strong product or project that where there's situations where there's specialized development work that is needed that doesn't exist in the state. So we've done some things in bioscience where nobody in the state can do that, or there's a specialized lab that needs to do some specialized testing and the facilities don't exist in the state, and we've made some exceptions in those cases, as long as it'll result in an improvement to the business here. So in order to apply for the program, businesses have to submit a application form. a business plan with a proof of concept demonstration. That's just that can vary, you know, and then the evidence of matching funds that I spoke to. Right now, the applications are submitted via email. We're moving to an online application system. We're in the midst of getting that updated and implemented. So hopefully by the start of 2017, we will be accepting applications online, but the nature of the things that we require will not change. So the review process is that there's usually an informational interview or the between a staff member, or you can work on the application. I encourage people to look at the guidelines and work through the application first. Once the application is submitted, then you meet with either myself or another staff member, and we review it together and make sure that we understand the project. And then we work on an advocacy model, and a staff member at DED would present the project to the review committee after they have an opportunity to review the application, and the advocate would explain all the details that might be overlooked by the review committee, and then the review committee makes a decision on the project whether or not to fund it. It's a 3-person committee, and they majority vote on that, and then the deputy director gets an opportunity to review it as well. So at that point, there's a notification from DED if it's will be funded. So things that we really look for during project selection is if the project leads to a scalable or high growth product. If the business meets the eligibility requirements, if there's a good description of the technology and enough to work off of and help people understand that, if there's a detailed financial analysis, and that really is the budget of what you're going to use the funds for, and then whether those budget details are supported by some external validation. So I don't encourage people to submit a budget without shopping around and figuring out how much things will cost, because that's part of what I do when I look at the applications as well. And then the economic impact potential, which is the direct potential of the use of funds. So that's why we prioritize projects that are going to use Nebraska employees and contractors. And then the hiring wage rates, if it's going to create high-paying and in-demand jobs and things that we want to see, the type of job creation we want to see in Nebraska. If the project is approved, it's time to get to work, and the clock starts for incurring expenses. We can only reimburse costs that are incurred after the date of approval. The business and prior to the end of the contract, businesses would receive a contract from DED, and typically it's a 12-month contract to start with, and you have 12 months to complete the project. In return to that, the businesses commit to providing updates every 6 months during the project timeline, and providing a feasibility report, which is a rather short 2-page report at the end of the project saying whether or not it was successful and whether it will be moving forward and going to market. The reimbursement request, everybody asks about how reimbursements are drawn down. They can be submitted as, I think the person who's handled it would prefer to have a minimum of a specific amount, about $1,000 at any time. So we don't want super frequent reimbursements, but other than that, it's kind of up to the business to decide when they want to request those reimbursements. We do direct payments through an ACH program, and that's unfortunately, the state works on a batch process, so payments typically take 10 to 15 days to process, but we try to move as quickly as possible at DED, and then it's kind of up to the state on what the timeline would be, because it goes into the next batch, which are processed every 2 weeks. Projects do have to be completed within 24 months, according to the statute, and we don't have any flexibility on that. The funds have to be requested and drawn down within 24 months of the start date. We try to work with businesses, and if they need to amend the scope of work, as long as it makes sense and it's still kind of working to the same objectives, we're happy to modify some of the terms and especially the end date of the contract. We have no problem extending that up to 24 months, provided that there's some progress being made by the business during the initial 12 months. There's a clawback provision in our contract, but it has rarely been utilized. The funds must be repaid if there isn't a good faith effort to commercialize the product, or if the business leaves the state within 3 years. So that's something when a lot of people are doing their business planning, if they're going to pursue the grant program, and they have to understand that if they have an early exit, they would need to repay those funds as part of that exit. So. And like I said before, it's the most accessible program, but there's the highest demand on it. In the past years, it's been as low as 1 in 3 applicants receiving funding. But last year, I think partially due to the fact that we are requiring people to line up their matching funds prior to application, it was much less. It was less than or more than half of the applicants received funding. So that's good news. And we also have some flexibility now, and we can move funds around at the end of the year, which is what we're doing this year. And we'll go above $1 million if we have some funding left over from, say, SBI or academic R&D. We'll shift that funding over to prototype where there's the need. So what's really important from a lot of that information was programmatic, but what's important to me as a reviewer and a person working with you or a business that is applying is a number of things that I think will help you be successful. And first and foremost, there needs to be a really clear and concise explanation of the product. People get hung up on getting into the details of something, but how you're going to the high level view and the summary of that is as important as the details, and being able to explain it like you're explaining it to a 5-year-old, especially if you're in a very niche industry that has a lot of acronyms or a lot of inherent or detailed knowledge, like something in the biosciences. You need to explain it to the layperson. So if I can't summarize the project in 30 seconds or less, it's really hard to take that to a committee and then help them understand it. So secondly, the budget is kind of a make or break thing. It needs to be realistic. It needs to be well thought out. When people are asking for materials or DD to purchase materials, then you should have priced those out, and you should have realistic estimates of what it's going to cost. And that can be substantiated by getting bids as well. The same thing with wages and consulting costs. I mean, I tell people, especially when they're doing software, to kind of break it down into sprints and say, we're going to spend so much time on user experience and, user design, and it'll take 2 weeks, and here's our wage rate. We're going to spend 3 weeks working on our database. We don't lock people into that. As long as it's a permissible cost, it's during the reimbursement phase, our reimbursement person will review it and make sure it's eligible, and you can kind of shift things around as necessary as long as it's within the scope of the project. But we want to make sure people have thought this through ahead of time. The third thing is a really strong understanding of the target market. We ask people to do a competitor summary and evaluate how their competitors stand on that. That can be direct or indirect competitors, and understand how your product is differentiating. Is it competing on price? Is it competing on quality? And so there's a lot of things to answer there, but not being aware of who your competitors are and who might be a threat to that company or to the product that you're developing is kind of not a good thing to have. So monetization, a lot of people, especially I don't want to pick on software companies, but some people don't think through the goal of monetization and how they're going to continue to make money on this product. So I tell people it's really important to at least have a plan. and that is, and to set some goals, do some shopping around, see what your competitors are charging if you have a direct competitor, validate it with, go talk to some potential customers and see what they're willing to pay for something. So that is something that some people omit, surprisingly. In addition to that, we look at the team composition. It's nice to see people with a business background. It's nice to see people with a technical background working together. I think it's important to include in the business plan a summary of your past accomplishments or a summary of your executives, what they've done in the past, kind of a CV or a resume that explains why they would be good at, why they will succeed at this. And then one thing that some people submit is external support. So letters of support from potential clients, from contractors, from local business people, and demonstrating that they have those relationships in place. We especially put some weight on those people that can, especially if they're doing like business-to-business sales. If a business expresses some interest in a product, that carries a lot of weight. Some pitfalls when applying is that people don't always establish a dialogue with the program staff. So give us a call. Ask if you want to do an informational interview, sit down for an hour and talk about your project and talk about the program, see how we might be able to help. That's fine. We're willing to answer questions, but when you're in the application phase, but try to be smart and work through it first. Go through the entire application, try to complete it, put together a business plan, work with some technical assistance vendors like MBDC or RAPE or somebody who can kind of provide some guidance on business plan, and then come back and say, I'm almost done, and can you clarify what you want on these, few points? And it's easier to process it like that than getting a half dozen questions over a few months that keep revisiting the same project. So another pitfall is not having a direct focus on the product. We've had some people who have ideas for technology, but they haven't decided which way they're going with it. So if they say that their product can solve a half dozen problems within a half dozen industries, and they have 10 different ways to monetize it, the review committee that I have to report to looks at it and says, well, what are they going to do? And without a focus and without one primary preferred path to market, and maybe some backups on that, saying if this doesn't work, we'll pursue this next, it looks like there's poor business planning on that side of it. So another thing is another pitfall is not being forthcoming when asked questions about it. We try to keep an open dialogue. We're not, we may push on some things, ask some probing questions, and it's not, we just want to understand what the project is. Some people are worried about their idea being stolen. I will say that our applicant records are now not subject to public records requests, so that was one change in the recent legislature. So nobody can request those records. Where we try not to share too much about applicants regardless, because a lot of people are working on trying to be first to market, so we don't share a lot of information about even award recipients. While we do try to tout success stories once they've been in the news and profile some people, we don't do that without permission from the company. So be aware that that's kind of our stance. We can't sign NDAs, but we really try to keep things hush-hush. Other thing people should, or businesses that are applying should do, is listen to feedback and be willing to accept that feedback and implement the advice. So I read through all the applications, and I usually provide some advice if I think there's something lacking in the business plan or in the application form, and I would advise you to take that to heart and really address that and try to revise that before finalizing a submission. In some cases, we recommend people pivot to a different program. We had another company recently come in, and they're out of a university, and they're both professors, and they're working on something. They applied for prototype, but it was really a better fit for academic R&D. We had more money in the academic R&D program. I told them that, and they were okay with shifting over and received more than they probably would have gotten in the prototype program in that case, and were able to do the same work, but it fit better and under that program. So, and the last is we've had some people burn bridges and get really angry. People get invested in their business ideas. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding to provide funding to everybody, and sometimes people are turned down for various reasons. There was one case early on where a company came in and they were doing some software development. They were not a very strong candidate for the prototype program. We told them that. They said, okay, thank you. What can we do next? And they ended up receiving $500,000 from the commercialization fund as investment funding to complete their project, which they probably wouldn't have gotten if they had not handled that better. So there's always people to work with. We have other programs. We have field staff members that are willing to meet with people and try to help in some ways, either make connections, utilize other programs, and we're completely willing to help people pivot. We had a gentleman who is developing what we like to call the Fitbit for cattle. It's a ear sensor that you put inside of a cattle's ear. He started off with just an idea, and we gave him an academic R&D grant for a small amount of money. He was not able to find a connection at UNL that he thought he would, and he came back after 6 months and said, I'm just not getting any traction. So, and he said at that point that he was going to move to a different technology.
Can we have you guys, if you are not muted on the call, please mute it on the call. We're hearing Anna.
There we go. Oh, I thought so.
I'm not sure.
Anyways.
Sorry about this.
Well, this gentleman, we ended up changing his grant to a prototype grant from an academic R&D grant. He successfully completed that. He actually received a small academic R&D grant a year later to do some different research, and he recently closed his Series A round with a valuation of $13 million. So that's an example of what can be done if you're willing to be patient and work with the staff. So any questions about the prototype grant?
If you apply for one grant and for the prototype grant and you're granted it, can you reapply for another one at a later date?
Yes. So we do accept applications for a second prototype, but it needs to be a different project. So that can be it can be anywhere from a different adding capabilities to a software package. So you have a suite of software. You had a prototype grant for one, and then you do another thing that will add to your business. I will say the bar gets higher when you apply again. So it becomes a little more difficult, and we need to see some traction. So you need to have some sales, some significant sales, and maybe employment growth before we'll consider a second prototype grant. But other than that, we'll do two, at least two in some cases. We haven't done a third, with the exception of one company, and it's a little bit easier in some cases where people utilize prototype and then maybe go and receive an academic R&D, or they pursue SBIR. The intention of prototype is to kind of feed into commercialization. So if you get to the point where you need working capital, that would be the program to pursue.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Honest, it's not me.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a
I have a question for you. You kind of mentioned this a little bit. If we're not really sure what program we would fit into or anything like that, you said we could contact somebody for maybe just an interview or a consultation. Are you the person
Sure.
about that, or is there somebody better?
Yeah. It's easiest to kind of have a phone call and see where describe the project and maybe pursue some paths there. And then he can refer you to some people.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anybody else?
On the tax credit, one, could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so the tax credit is a first come first served program, and typically it's ran out the last 3 years. It's ran out on day one. So you need to apply during the right time. Usually it's November, December. What needs to happen is you need to become a qualified small business, and your investor has to be a qualified individual investor, which just means that you need to register with the department through Joe Lauber, the person who handles that. The minimum investment needs to be $25,000, and you can get up to 40% of that back as a refundable tax credit. That's for an individual. It's a minimum of $50,000 for a fund, which is a LLC composed of 3 or more individuals. There are lifetime caps for business, for the investor and for the business, so that people can only utilize it so much. And there are some requirements in terms of who can invest in the company, which includes the person who, if you derive a certain percentage of your income from the company, you can't invest in your own company and receive the tax credit. It's really for angel investors that are investing in a company that they don't derive income from directly. So, and it's in return for an equity stake. So angel investment is always, buying a stake of the company.
Okay. Now, question, can it be like a personal loan to the company to where they would get the tax credit, or does it have to be only where they would get a share of the company?
Unfortunately, it has to be an equity investment. I'm pretty sure of that, because you can have a convertible note that would convert to equity at a later point, but the equity investment has to be made within a 90-day window after you apply for the credit and are notified by DED that you're eligible for the tax credit. The investor has to make that investment at that point, or convert a convertible note into equity at that point. So it is only for an equity stake in the company. Loans are not included.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked that.
Good.
Sorry. Because we've been, anyhow, we have somebody that we've been working with, and we'd like to just get a note type of deal versus losing any equity of our company, if at all possible. But if we can do with a convertible note type of thing, that would be the way to go, I think.
Well, it does need to convert at that point of during the 90-day window, so it does need to be an equity stake at that point. Because convertible notes,
how long does it have to stay there? Say 6 months down the road, they want, to buy out or something. Do they have to stay with it for 2 years?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's beyond my understanding of the program. So I would suggest that you contact Joe Lauber, and I can give you his contact information if you email me. I can provide that to you, and he can answer any questions on that side of things.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. I did not think I would take up the full hour window, but it appears I have. So,
thank you so much. This is all wonderful, wonderful information, and we need more people to know about it.
Fair enough.
All right. right. So I'm going to do one last call for questions. Anybody else have anything else? All right. Well, thank you so much, Ben. And a big shout out to our sponsor today, the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, for sponsoring this call. If you like trainings like these, we do have them for free every month, free call-in training. Our next month's training is going to be on mobile commerce and e-commerce and how you can harness the power of those. I will be sending out an email with the sign up for that. If you have any questions, just let me know. So thank you again and have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thank you.